So this is the second part of the discussion of this 2021 A-level economics MCQ paper. Look at this question 26. It says, assume that in a given time period, general price level of a country tripled. Right. Next part, in the same period, the income level of a certain household rose from 40,000 to 80,000, which means the income has doubled. What happened to this household's nominal and real income? So if you just look at the equation of calculating this real income, that's a very simple equation. We take the nominal income, right? We take the nominal income. This should be divided by the price index and we multiply this by 100. Right. Now, what has happened to the nominal income according to the question? See, in this part of the question, it's clearly mentioned that the person's income has doubled. See, it has increased from 40,000 to 80,000. So it doesn't matter. There are two different approaches to get this answer. So I'll show you. First, I'll show you the one that I think is the most easiest, right? The most convenient, right? So you just think that it doesn't matter how much was his nominal income previously, right? Now, previously it was 40,000, but for the time being, let's assume that we don't know that. So somehow this value get double. See, 40,000 has become 80,000, which means simply the value has doubled. And what happens to the price index? General price level has tripled. See that now, it doesn't matter how much we had previously, but this thing has tripled. Now, you just think about the values that we have in the numerator and in the denominator. The numerator's value get doubled. The denominator's value get tripled. Sarlava in this case, what has happened? The denominator's value has increased by a higher amount than the increase in the numerator's value. So what should happen to the real income? They should decrease, right? Mathematically, they should decrease. So this is the first approach that I mentioned earlier. So based on this approach, you can understand the answer. See, the question asks us to recognize what happens to the nominal income and the real income. See, the nominal income has doubled, which means the nominal income has increased. So the answer has to be either this, or maybe this, or maybe this. And then what has happened to the real income? According to the mathematical equation that we use, real income should have decreased. So the answer has to be then this first one. But wait, this is just the first approach, but I'll show you the second approach as well. So let me show you how to calculate this real income for both these periods. So let's say that this is the first period and this is the second period. And in period 1, right, the general price level, let's assume that to be 100, right? So let's calculate real income. The nominal income of the person is rupees 40,000 and the price level, let's assume that to be 100. So this is again multiplied by 100 so that the real income is still 40,000. And when it comes to period 2, see what has happened to the nominal income. Nominal income has become 80,000 and the general price level has tripled, which means if it was 100 previously, now it is 300. So we should multiply this by 100. So simply it's 80,000 over 300 multiplied by 100. So the answer is 26,666.67. See, once again, the same thing happens. So look at this one. What has happened to the nominal income over the period? Nominal income has increased. And what has happened to the real income? See, 40,000 was the previous value, but now in this year, the real income has decreased to 26,000 something. See, we still get the same answer. But if you understand the first approach that I mentioned, right, you don't need to do any mathematical calculation and you can select the answer easily. All right, now look at this question 27. In this one, it says households demand more money as an asset. See that now. The demand for money increases as an asset. So what's the theoretical part related to this question? If households demand more and more money balances as an asset, this question is related to this speculative motive money demand, right? Speculative motive money demand. And in speculative motive money demand, we say that there is a negative relationship, right? We have a negative relationship between these two variables. So we discussed that under speculative motive money demand. And what are the two variables we consider there? On one side, we take interest rate, right? Interest rate. And on the other side, we take the speculative motive money demand, money demand. Right. So if there's a negative relationship between the interest rate and the speculative motive money demand, what does that mean? If speculative money demand increases, if people demand more money balances as an asset, the interest rate should decrease. So that's the theoretical part related to this. So if you go through the answers, the first one says households demand more money balances as an asset when general price level increases. No, this is not with regard to the speculative money demand. This is with relate to transaction motive money demand. Second one, nominal national income falls. Again, not relevant to the speculative money demand. And the third one says nominal national income increases. No, it's simply the opposite of the second one. If the second one is not related to this speculative motive money demand, even the third one is not related. But look at the fourth one. Fourth one says nominal interest rate falls. See, as I mentioned, if speculative motive money demand has increased, interest rate should decrease. And that's what they have mentioned in the fourth option. So for this question 27, fourth one is the answer. Right. Now look at this next question 28 one. It says, which of the following is most liquid? So most liquid asset is always money. And the second highest or the second most liquid asset is demand deposits maintained in commercial banks. So since we do not have money here, the answer has to be obviously demand deposits. And if I just show you the order of these assets based on the liquidity, right? So this will be the, let's say, the first one from the given options. And then we have, let's say, fixed deposits. And let's say we have government securities, and then company shares, and finally we have real estate. So this is the order that we receive if we arrange them based on liquidity. Right, now look at this question 29. It says, suppose a customer makes a deposit of rupees 400 with a commercial bank which keeps 80 as statutory reserve. All right. All else constant, how much the bank have in excess reserve and what's the size of the deposit multiplier? Okay, the first part is about excess reserve, and that's very simple. How do we calculate this excess reserve? We write excess reserve equals, let's say, the total deposit. From this you need to deduct the statutory reserve, right? So the total deposit that the bank receives this time is 400 and the statutory reserve is 80. So that the excess reserve arise from this particular deposit is 320. So the answer has to be one of these. And in the second part, we see deposit multiplier. So just tell me, how do we calculate this deposit multiplier? Deposit multiplier is equal to 1 over SRR. But the problem in this question, we don't get this SRR directly. Right? Directly, we don't get it. But still, we can calculate this SRR. So what's the equation of calculating SRR? I mean, statutory reserve ratio. The equation is statutory reserve divided by the deposit multiplied by 100. So statutory reserve, when the bank receives a deposit of 400, they keep 80 as a statutory reserve. So statutory reserve is 80, then deposit is 400. You multiply this by 100 and how much we receive? we received 20%, right? 20%. So that now you can put that 20% into this equation. Simply it's 1 over 20%, if not 0.2. So 1 over 0.2 is simply 5. So excess reserve is 320 and the deposit multiplier is 5. So that the fourth one is the answer for this question 29. Look at this 30th question. It says, which of the following will result in an increase in the money supply? Okay, so we will read all the options given. First one says, an increase in the standing deposit facility rate. So there are again two approaches to look at this one. You can just consider, I mean, this is the easiest. You can just consider this to be the interest rate. So what happens? Interest rate get increased here. When interest rates get increased, generally what happens? The credit becomes more expensive. So that people will not demand, right? People, the general public will not demand credit. So credit demand reduces, and as a result, what will happen to the money supply? Money supply will decrease. So that's just the general approach to look at this thing. But if you just look at this one theoretically, SDFR means that is the interest rate offered by the central bank when the commercial banks purchase the treasury bills and treasury bonds from the central bank. So what happens? Here on this side, we get the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and on this side, we get the commercial banks. When this SDFR is increased, right? Central bank sells treasury bills and treasury bonds, so that since the rate is high, they purchase more and more treasury bills and treasury bonds. So cash get transferred from commercial banks to the central bank. And then what will happen? When the cash get transferred to the central bank from the commercial banks, reserves get decreased. When reserves get decreased, ability to create credit, right? Ability to create credit also decreases. And then what will happen to the money supply? Money supply will go down, right? So the question asks us to recognize which of the following will result in an increase in the money supply. So this is not the answer there. And look at the second one. Second one says selling bonds to the commercial banks by the central bank. So the same thing happens, right? When the central bank sells bonds to the commercial banks, again, what will happen? Reserves get passed to the central bank, and as a result, ability to create credit decreases, and then the money supply decreases. So the same outcome, right? So as a result of the second one, money supply will decrease, not that it increases. So that is also not the answer. Third one says an increase in the discount rate. So what's this discount rate? Simply, this is the interest rate charged by the central bank when the central bank offers loans to the commercial banks. So once again, you can consider this to be generally the interest rate. So when the interest rate is increased, as we discussed in the first one, right? When the interest rate is increased in general, credit will be expensive, so that people will demand lower credit, and as a result, money supply will decrease. Look at the fourth one, a decrease in the external assets of the central bank. So what are these external assets of the central bank? This is what we recognize as net foreign assets. And these net foreign assets is one determinant of money supply in an economy. So if one of the determinants of money supply decreases, even the money supply decreases. So this is not the answer there. The fifth one says decrease in the statutory reserve ratio. See, like in our previous example, when we calculated this statutory reserve ratio, we got the value as 20%. So what if this 20% get decreased to 10%? If the statutory reserve rate get decreased, excess reserve will increase. And the commercial bank uses this excess reserve to create credit. So their ability to create credit, right? Ability to create credit will increase, and as a result, money supply will also increase. See, that's the answer for the question then. See, the question asks us to recognize which one of the following will result in an increase in the money supply. So the answer is this fifth one. All right, now we will move to this question 31. It says main characteristics of common resources. So as I think the best way to recognize the answer for this one is to think of an example for common resource. So what's the example, the best example for these common resources? The best example would be fish in the ocean, right? Fish in the ocean, right? If it is a fish in the ocean, see the now, is there a rivalry in consumption? Of course, there is a rivalry. Why is that? Because if one person catches fish in the ocean, right, the availability reduces to the other person, so that there is rivalry in consumption, and that's true. And think about the excludability. Can we ask someone not to go to ocean to catch fish? එහෙම කරන්න බෑ. So ocean is a common resource so that anyone can use it. This resource is non-excludable. What are the two qualities? On one side, there is rivalry, and on the other side, we have non-excludability. So as I think, no point of discussing these options that they have provided, because from this example, we can clearly recognize that these are the two characteristics related to common resources. So that we will move to this question 32 now. In question 32, they say the diagram below shows private and social marginal cost curves and the demand curve. Okay, so we get the demand curve, and here we have the supply curve based on marginal private cost, and we get the supply curve based on marginal social cost. And what's the question? If this market is an unregulated free market, then okay, if it is an unregulated free market, right, this free market only considers the demand based on the marginal private benefit and the supply based on the marginal private cost. So based on the marginal private benefit and marginal private cost, see, the equilibrium is here. This is the equilibrium price. If not, simply this is the market price and this is the market quantity. But if you just focus on the supply curve based on the social marginal cost, see, based on the social marginal cost and the demand, socially optimum quantity is just Q2, but the market quantity is really higher than that. And the socially optimum price has to be higher than the current market price. If you know these things, you will be able to find the answer. So we will read this. First one says, the level of output is socially optimum. See, is it the socially optimum level of output that we have in this free market? No. Right? The output is higher than the socially optimum output. So this part is wrong. So no point of reading the other part. Again, the second one says the level of output is less than the socially optimum level. Is it less than the socially optimum level? No, it's really higher than the socially optimum level. So that is also wrong. Third one says allocation of resources will be efficient. Is it efficient? If it is efficient, right? If there is this allocative efficiency, resources must be allocated to produce the socially preferred quantity of goods. So this is the socially preferred quantity of good, but the market has allocated this much. And the resource allocation is not efficient, it's inefficient. Fourth one says too much output will be produced. Of course, it's true because the socially optimum quantity is lower than the market allocation, so that the market produces too much. So that's true. So fourth one is the answer for this question 32. So fifth one is simply the opposite of the fourth one, so that is not true there. Right, now look at this question 33. In question 33, it says the primary balance of the budget is the difference between. Okay, so what do we know with regard to this primary balance of the budget? So let me just show you the equation. So we write primary balance, right? Primary balance of the budget is simply equals to total government receipts. So when I say receipts, it includes both revenue and grants. So from the total government receipts, we deduct total expenditure, right? Total expenditure, remember, excluding interest payment. right? Excluding interest payment. So this is the typical equation of calculating this primary balance of the budget. Okay, now we will go through the options provided. First option says primary balance of the budget is the difference between total expenditure and the total recurrent expenditure. Is it the difference between these two? No, it is simply the difference between total government receipts and the total government expenditure excluding interest payments. So this is not the answer there. Second one says budget deficit and debt service payments of the government. Okay, so it is the difference between budget deficit. Okay, so let me show you this budget deficit. This is how we calculate this budget deficit. Budget deficit is equal to, we write total government receipts minus simply total expenditure, right? Total expenditure. When I just say total expenditure, it includes, what does it include? It includes even the interest payments. So see, inside the primary balance of the budget, we don't get the interest payment, but inside the budget deficit, we do get the interest payment, right? I mean, we have deducted that, right? We have considered that when calculating the budget deficit. And according to the second option, what do they say? Budget deficit, primary balance of the budget is the difference between budget deficit and debt service payments of the government. See, now we have budget deficit, okay, and in the budget deficit we have these two components, right? In the budget deficit we have these two components, and from these two components, if you subtract, right, if you subtract the debt service payment, right, if you subtract the debt service payment, they say, what do we receive? They say that we receive primary balance of the budget, right? Is it true? Is it true? The problem with this is inside the debt service payments, generally speaking, right? Generally speaking, we say debt service payment is the total, I mean, whatever the expenditure, whatever the payment that is related to interest. So generally, in debt service payments, we get two components. And what are the two components? We get the interest component. Also, we have the loan repayment, right? Loan repayment. දැන් ඔයා හිතනවා බැංකුවෙන් ගිහිල්ලා රුපියල් 100ක ලෝන් එකක් ගත්තොත් එහෙම ඔයාලට ඉන්ට්‍රස්ට් එකක් ගෙවනවානේ. ඒතර අපි තුමේ රුපියල් 100 අපි මාස 10කට තමයි ගෙවන්නේ කියලා. දැන් 100 10 බෙදුවම එතන එන උත්තරේ 10යි. හැබැයි ඔයා ඇත්තටම මාසෙකට ගෙවන්න ඕනේ 10ක් නෙමෙයි. අපි තුම රුපියල් 12ක් විතර ගෙවන්න ඕනේ කියලා. ඒතර මේ ගෙවන 12න් රුපියල් 2ක් අපි අඳුර ගන්නවා, that is the interest, and that 10 that we pay, that's the loan repayment. ඒතර when I say debt service payment, it is simply generally that is the total of these two, right? So when I say debt service payment, I'm referring to this value 12, not to 2, not to 10. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මේකේ පොඩි ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ loan repayment is included in the debt service payment, එතකොට මේ කියන කතන්දරේ වැරදි. හරි. ඒ නිසා අපි ඒක දැනට එහෙම තියාගෙන ඉස්සරහට යමු. Third one says total revenue and total expenditure including interest payment on its debt. See that now? Primary balance of the budget is the difference between total revenue. Revenue මත් නෙමෙයි අතම receipts පෙන්වන්නේ. මොකද revenue කියලා කියන්නේ that is something that we earn නේ. ඒතර මේක ඇතුලේ grants උත් තියෙනවා. Anyway, ඒතර එතනත් පොඩි වැරද්දක් තියෙනවා. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් it says total expenditure including interest. No, it should exclude interest. ඒ නිසා මේක කිසිම වෙලාවක ගන්න බෑ. Fourth one, total revenue including grants. Yeah, that is true. And total capital expenditure including interest payment. Once again, it includes interest payments. අනිත් පැත්තෙන් capital expenditure විතරයි. Capital expenditure plus the interest payment, which is again wrong. And the fifth one says, again completely wrong. Fifth one says total revenue including grants. Okay, that is true. Total recurrent expenditure including interest payments on its debt. See that now again including interest payment on its debt, which is again totally wrong. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා මෙතන තියෙන ඔප්ෂන්ස් පහම ඇත්තටම වැරදි හරියට ගත්තොත් එහෙම. හරියට ගත්තොත් වැරදි. නමුත් මේවා කොහොමත් වැරදි නිසා චුට්ටක් හරි එක if the loan repayment is zero in that given situation, yes, this second one will be the answer. Right. But honestly, I don't think that it has to be the answer. Right. Look at this question 34. It says the share of total outstanding domestic and foreign debt of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka as a percentage of okay. So this is not going to be relevant to your A level year. So we'll skip this one. Right. Look at this question 35 now. Question 35 says, which of the following considered a supply side policy? So what are these supply side policies? We have two main policies. On one side, we get the demand management policies. And what are the examples for such demand management policies? Now, we have the fiscal policy. We also have the monetary policy. And both these falling under demand management policies. And what are the supply side policies? These are the policies implemented by the government in order to help the supplier to increase the production, to increase the real output. Right. So the question asks us to recognize an example for a supply side policy. Okay, look at the first one. Reduction in government budget deficit. See now, the government budget deficit is more towards its fiscal policy. And I told you that fiscal policy is an example for a demand management policy. And so this is not a supply side policy. So that's wrong. Second one, granting investment tax credits. See the now investment tax credits for businesses to encourage investment. The government encourages investments by providing investment tax credits so that the suppliers get motivated so that they start to produce, and as a result the real output increases. Yes, true, this is a real supply side policy. The third one, imposition of tariff on imported goods. Imposing tariff will never be a benefit to the supplier. So this is totally ignorable then. Fourth one says transfer of privately owned businesses to government sector. I think it's about private investments, private businesses ඔක්කොම discourage වෙන එක නෙවෙන්නේ, so it will not increase the real output. It will decrease the real output for sure. And the fifth one says an increase in government spending that would lead to increase in aggregate demand. See the word itself. From the word itself, we can recognize that this is a demand management policy, not a supply side policy. So the answer for this question 35 is the second one. Right, look at this question 36 now. It says, the diagram shows production possibility curves for two countries, A and B. All right, so we get the production possibility curves. Country A can produce 100 million tons of rubber, okay, 100 million tons of rubber and 50 million tons of cinnamon. Yes, we see that. Country B can produce 200 million tons of rubber and 100 million tons of cinnamon. All right. Yeah, we see them simply by looking at the diagram, and then they say, according to the theory of comparative advantage. Okay, so according to the theory of comparative advantage, which country has the comparative advantage? So to answer to that, we need to calculate the opportunity costs, right? So let me tabulate the data first, then it's easy for us because that's the typical method that we apply. We use the table to calculate the opportunity cost. So we have, let's say, country A, right? We have country A. Also, we have country B. So each country produces both cinnamon and then rubber. So cinnamon production in country A is 50, and then rubber production in country A is 100. In country B, cinnamon production is 100, and then rubber production is 200. So remember, these are the outputs, and that's why we get the production possibilities curve. The production possibilities curve represent the output. And so when you calculate this opportunity cost, you need to apply this output approach. So how do we find this opportunity cost according to output approach? Let's say opportunity cost of good X, right? Opportunity cost of good X according to output approach is equal to delta Y over delta X. So if I simply consider this to be this good X and this to be the good Y, so what's the opportunity cost of producing cinnamon or this good X? So that is delta y over delta x. So in country A, delta y is 100, delta x is 50. So that the answer is 2. And in country A, the opportunity cost of producing rubber, so opportunity cost of y, then that is delta x over delta y. So that the answer is 0.5. And in country B, the opportunity cost of producing cinnamon, if not x, is delta y over delta x. So that is 2. And in country B, opportunity cost of producing rubber නැත්තම් y එක මොකක්ද තුර delta x over delta y. So that the answer is 0.5. Okay, if you try to recognize the country with the comparative advantage for each good, ඔයා මොකද කරන්නේ? මුලින්ම ඔයා pick කරනවා this good cinnamon. Now you need to recognize the country with the lowest opportunity cost. And surprisingly, see what happens. The opportunity cost of producing cinnamon in country A is 2, even that is the same in country B. And if you just pick the other product, rubber, opportunity cost of producing rubber in country A is 0.5, even in country B, it's the same thing. Elisa, in this situation, no country has a comparative advantage for any good. මොකද ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ opportunity costs, they are same. ඕක තමයි කතන්දරේ. එහෙනම් අපි බලමු answers දිහා. First one says both countries can benefit by specialization. No, there's no possibility to specialize one specific product because, I mean, based on comparative advantage, they can't do that. And again, second one says, according to the theory of comparative advantage, country B has a higher opportunity cost than country A in producing cinnamon. No, the opportunity cost is same. Country A has a higher opportunity cost than country B in producing cinnamon. No, it's same. Country B exports cinnamon to country A. No, it's impossible based on the comparative advantage. Fifth one says trade between country A and B cannot take place. Yes, it's true. According to the comparative advantage principle, right, there will not be any international trade between these two countries. Okay, look at this question 37 now. It says, which of the following options correctly indicates composition of imports at present? No, we are not going to discuss such questions. 38. The table below shows the record of export price index and import price index of a country for a period of 6 years. Okay, so we have 3 years in this first table, the last 3 years in the second table. And what do they ask? In which year were the terms of trade most favorable relative to year 1? Okay, so we have 6 years. So if I show you the equation of calculating this terms of trade, it is simply export price index over import price index multiplied by 100. එතන මෙතනදිත් mathematics තමයි අපිට ඕන වෙන්නේ. බලන්න ඔයා දන්න සරල දේ. මාරම සරලව කිව්වොත් එම 2 divided by 2 කීයද? That's 1. මම එකකින් කිව්වේ මොකද්ද? ඒකේ මම කිව්වේ if the numerator is same as the denominator, answer will be 1. Right? එතකොට දැන් අපි මෙතන 100 වලින් multiply කරන නිසා in the first year, see, price index of export is 100, price index of import is 100. ඒ නිසා එන උත්තරේ අරක 100 වලින් multiply කළාම එන්නේත් 100ම තමයි. So in year 1, right, in year 1 it's simply 100. හරි, දැන් ප්‍රශ්නේ අහන්නේ in which year were the terms of trade most favorable relative to year 1. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් when you compare the other terms of trade values with the year 1 value, there must be a significant increase in that second year. ඒකනේ වෙන්න ඕනේ. හරි. ඉතින් දැන් අපි බලමු මේක කොහොමද ලේසියෙන්ම හදන්නේ කියලා. ලේසියෙන්ම හදනකොට if you just look at this thing, year 5 කෙලින්ම අයින් කළා දාන්න පුළුවන්. Why is that? Because in year 5 also අර මම කලින් කියපු දේ වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකද 2 divided by 2 into 100 නැත්නම් 2 divided by 2 is 1. ඒ වගේ 129 or 129 into 100 will give you again 100, which is same as the year 1 terms of trade. එතන favorable සිද්ධියක් නැහැ. ඒක අයින් කළා දාන්න පුළුවන්. සහ ඊට වඩා ඉක්මනට අයින් කළා දාන්න පුළුවන් මෙන්න මේ දෙක. බලා ගන්න මෙතන තියෙන්නේ 105 and 108. දැන් මම කලින් යපුවා වගේ 2 over 2 කීයද කියලානේ. 2 over 2 is 1 නේ. එතන මෙන්න මේක කීයද? 1 over 2 කීයද? 1 over 2 is half නේ. ඒකනේ මම එකෙන් අදහස් කරන්නේ if the numerator's value is lower than the denominator's value. See, numerator's value is lower. It's just 105 than the denominator's value. ඒ නිසා දැන් ඔයාට එන value එක 100 වලට වඩා අඩු value එකක් තමයි එන්නේ mathematics. right 100 වලට වඩා අඩු value එකක් තමයි වෙන්නේ. කලින් අවුරුද්දේ 100 හැබැයි මේක ඊටත් වඩා අඩුයි. ඒ නිසා එයාව අයින් කරලා දාන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට පස්සේ if you take the values in year 4, the same thing happens. See, the value in the numerator is lower than the value in the denominator. ඒ නිසා මෙතනත් එන value එක 100 වලට වඩා අඩුයි. So simply you can ignore that. Now only two values are remaining. What are the two values? Year 3 set of values and year 6 values. දැන් ඔයා ඔය දෙක පොඩ්ඩක් ලියාගත්තොත්, so let's say in year 3 we have export price index and import price index. So year 3 and year 6. So export price index is 112, import price index is 110. In year 6, export price index is 150, import price index is 130. ඔයා කැමතිම නම් මේක හදලා බලන්න පුළුවන්. නමුත් මේවවත් හදලා බලන්න කිසිම උවමනාවක් නැහැ. ඔයා ওই ලක්කන් එක චුට්ටක් ඉන්නවා නම් ඔයාලට කතන්දරේ තේරෙනවා. This comes to the numerator and this comes to the denominator නේ. So 112 over 110 multiplied by 100. ඊට පස්සේ 150 over 130 multiplied by 100. එතකොට if we have a smaller gap between these two values, then මෙයා 112 වෙනකොට අනිත් එක්කෙනා 110. ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයා මේකේ percentage එක බලුවම එන value එකක් මාර අඩු value එකක් තමයි එන්නේ. හැබැයි if you compare the other two values, see then now the numerator's value is 150 and the denominator's value is 130, and there's a significant gap between this numerator's value and the denominator's value. අන්න ඒ වෙලාවට එන percentage එකත් ගොඩාක් වැඩි percentage එකක් තමයි වෙන්නේ. So if you calculate the terms of trade for this year 3 and year 6, the highest terms of trade you will receive definitely for year 6, as we have a higher gap between these two values. And so answer for this question 38 is this fifth one, and you don't need to do a single calculation to recognize that. But if you really need, you do the calculation, then you will understand everything that I mentioned. Right. Now come to this question 39. It says, suppose a Sri Lankan investor purchased shares in a manufacturing company in Japan. Okay, so the value is this. How would this transaction be recorded in the balance of payments in Sri Lanka? See, purchasing shares in a different country. Definitely it comes under not, see the now I can't exactly say that it definitely comes under this thing. If the share percentage is greater than 10%, we assume that it is a direct investment. එහෙම නොත් එහෙම කියන්නේ direct investment account එකට. හැබැයි fortunately මෙතන එහෙම option එකක් දීලා නැහැ. ඒ නිසා all these typical share purchases falling under portfolio investment account. So since this is an asset to Sri Lankan investor, we should debit this to the portfolio investment account. And where is this credited? This is credited if he paid this in cash. It is credited in the currency and deposits account, which is coming under other investment account. And there we credit it, and portfolio investment account is debited. So the double entry goes as portfolio investment account is debited, and then other investment account is credited. All right, so that's the answer for this question 39. Right, now we will move to this question 40. In question 40, we get this. The table below shows some selected data from the balance of payment statement of a country. Okay, so we get the exports of goods and imports of goods. So exports is 600 and imports is 800, so that we can simply, by getting the difference between these two, we can calculate the trade balance, right? Balance in the trade account. So the balance is minus 200. The reason, right, export is lower than imports, and its expenditure is higher than the revenue, so the value has to be a minus value. So this is the trade account balance, and then we get the services account balance, that's a plus value. And also we have the primary income account balance, that's minus 80, and secondary income account balance is plus 150. So the total of all these, right, the total of all these we can consider to be the current account balance. So let me write current account balance. How much is that? That's minus 200 plus 30 minus 80 plus 150. එතකොට එතන තියෙන්නේ 150 30 කියන්නේ 180 280 කියන්නේ minus 280, so that the value in the current account balance is minus 100. And capital account balance is also given to you, so let me write it. Capital account balance, that's how much? That's 60. And by giving all this data, what do they ask us to recognize? According to the information in the table, which statement is correct for the balance of payments situation of this country? Balance of payment situation. And if you look at the provided options, right, there is a deficit of 180 billion on the trade balance. See that now trade balance is how much? Minus 200, not 180. So that's wrong there. Second one, there is a surplus of 140 billion on the capital and financial account. Okay, the problem, we don't still know the financial account balance. ඒ නිසා අපිට මේක හරිද වැරදිද කියන එකපාර කියන්න බැරි නිසා මම චුට්ටක් එක තියාගන්න. Right. The third one, there is a surplus of 100 billion on the current account. So the current account balance is minus 100, which is not a surplus. So this is also wrong there. Right. The fourth one says there's a deficit of 40 billion on the financial account. See that now deficit of 40 on the financial account. I don't have the financial account balance. Elisa, the best thing, since I can't select the answer from the second, fourth, and the fifth options, the best thing is to calculate the financial account balance. So what's the equation that we use to calculate this financial account balance? The equation is, you write current account balance plus capital account balance plus, you write financial account balance. Financial account balance plus the balance in errors and omissions account has to be 0. Right. So in this question, current account balance is just minus 100. So it's minus 100 plus capital account balance is, that's a plus 60 plus financial account balance is the one that we try to find. So let me take it as X. Errors and omissions, we don't have any information related to this. So that let me consider that to be 0, must be equal to 0. Right? Must be equal to 0. එතකොට our job is to find this x. එහෙනම් අපි x හොයන්න කොහමද? ඔයා ගන්නවා මේ දෙකේ total එක, that is minus 40 plus x equals 0. So x is equal to, when you send this minus 40 to other side, it becomes plus 40. And what is x? What is x? X is the financial account balance, right? X is the financial account balance. So balance in the financial account is a plus 40. So if it is plus 40, what's the correct answer from the provided options? Fifth one says there is a surplus of 40 billion on the financial account, 100% true. That's the answer. Right. Look at this question 41 now. According to Marshall-Lerner condition, in which of the following situations current account of the balance of payments will improve following a depreciation of exchange rate? Okay, just because the rupee get depreciated, it will not ensure a favorable balance in the balance of payment. එහෙම favorable balance එකක් තියෙන නම් after depreciation, Marshall-Lerner condition should be satisfied. So what is this Marshall-Lerner condition? Price elasticity of imports, right? Price elasticity of demand for imports plus price elasticity of demand for exports has to be greater than 1. On ඕක වෙනවා නම් depreciation of rupee will make a favorable impact on BOP. හරි. දැන් ඉතින් අපි බලන්න ඕනේ මෙතන දීලා තියෙන්නේ මෙහෙම වෙන්නේ කොයි එකේද කියලා. Right. So get the total of the magnitude. I mean, just ignore this minus thing. So 0.6 and 0.4 will give you 1. It's not greater than 1, but it's just 1. Here it's 0.8 plus this thing, so that will be 1.5. Okay, for the time being, that's the answer then. But we'll add the other two. මොකද ඊට වඩා වැඩි value එකක් තිබුණොත් එතන ඒක තමයි answer එක වෙන්නේ. But here when we get the total of 0.3 and 0.5, we get 0.8. Here it's 0.6. And in the last one, it's 0.9. So from the provided answers, we have only one answer which presents a total greater than 1. එහෙනම් මොකක්ද? That's the second option. So for 41, second one is the answer. Right. 42. It says in a floating exchange rate system. First one, balance of payments will always be in surplus. See, we don't know that again. Just because we have a floating exchange rate system, it doesn't always ensure that we have a surplus or even we have a deficit in the balance of payment. එනිසා මේ answers දෙකම තනිකරම we can't comment on those simply by looking at the foreign exchange rate system. හරි. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඒක ignorable දෙකම. Third one, completely insulated the economy from external forces. එහෙම වෙන්නේ කොහොමද? If it's floating exchange rate system, economy is vulnerable to any external force, any external shock. Right. The fourth one, එතන මේක වැරදි. The exchange rate should adjust to equate demand and supply of foreign exchange. See, that is what we mean by the floating exchange rate system. That is the system in which the exchange rate get decided based on the foreign exchange demand and foreign exchange supply. So this is the answer for the question. Fifth one says government intervenes to influence the determination of the exchange rate, which is totally wrong. මොකද එහෙමනම් ඒක floating කියලා කියන නමවත් ගැලපෙන්නේ නැහැ. Right. So ඒකට වෙන්නේ fixed exchange rate system, right? So the fifth one is related to this fixed exchange rate system, and that's wrong for this given thing. And our answer for this question 42 is the fourth one. Right. Look at this 43rd question. Which of the following would likely contribute to achieve faster rate of economic growth? Okay, economic growth. What do we mean by this term economic growth? That is the increase in, let's say, productive capacity. If not in simple terms, that is the increase in real output of the economy. So we just need to pick the answer which will increase the productive capacity, if not the real output of the economy. Right. The first one says more rapid consumption of natural resources. See, if you are consuming natural resources rapidly, they will be depreciated. Right? They will be depreciated. And as a result, future productive capacity will further decrease. So that's not the answer there. Second one, protective trade policies. See, protective trade policies will never support the increase of the real output or the real productive increase in productive capacity. The protective trade policies are against this free trade. Right? So that's ignorable then. Third one, higher government funding for research and development. See that now, if we engage in more and more research and development, our productive capacity will increase in the future, right? And then the economy will grow in the future. So this ensures a faster economic growth in the future. So that's the answer for the question 43. But look at the fourth one, increase in consumer subsidies. See, by providing subsidies for the consumers, we can always ensure that the real output or the productive capacity increases. So that's a problem with this fourth option. So this is also not the answer. Fifth one, higher taxes on households and firms. This will never increase the productive capacity. This will discourage the production and consumption both. Right, look at this question 44 now. It says the key social and economic dimensions captured in Human Development Index are. See, then now we had at least one question from this Human Development Index in almost all these papers that we discussed. එනිසා මම අර හැමතිස්සෙම කියනවා වගේ these are very well recognized accepted facts. ඔයාට තියෙන්නේ මේක මතක තියාගෙන ඉන්න එක විතරයි. ඕන note එකක මේවා තියෙනවා. So what's the answer? Long and healthy life, education, and decent standard of living. So these are the key social and economic dimensions that we consider when developing Human Development Index. Right, let's move to this question 45. It says the table below shows the income shares by quintiles of income receivers in a country in 2010 and 2020. So you get the quintile values, the income share of each quintile in year 2010 and year 2020. And what can you recognize by looking at this? First quintile owns 5% of the income in 2010, and fifth quintile owns 45% of the income in 2010. But in 2020, what has happened to those values? The first quintile owns only 4%, of the income, whereas a fifth quintile owns 50% of the income or the wealth. See that now the disparity has widened. Disparity has increased. Okay, තමයි වෙලා තියෙන්නේ නා. එහෙනම් what's the answer then? There has been an improvement in resource allocation in the country. No, it's the total opposite. The distribution of income become more unequal, 100% true. So that is the answer, and no point of discussing the other options for this question because the answer is very much clear. Right, let's move to this question 46 now. It says some of the typewriter operators without computer skills lost their jobs as computers started to dominate the field of word processing. This is an example of which one of the following unemployment category? See that now. So the first question that you should ask from yourself is why this unemployment has arisen. See, this unemployment has arisen because of the development of technology. So if unemployment arises as a result of this development of technology, how do we call that unemployment? We recognize that as structural unemployment. So for this question 46, answer is the third one, structural unemployment, and that's the unemployment that happens as a result of technological advancements in the economy. What is this frictional unemployment? Frictional unemployment refers to this situation. Like, for example, if one person resigns from the job and if he is looking for another job, අන්න ඒ period එක අර එකකින් අයින් වෙලා අනිත් එකට යන ඒ period එක අපි අඳුර ගන්නවා as frictional unemployment. The second one is about disguised unemployment. And what is this disguised unemployment? We had the same thing in 2020 MCQ paper as well, as I remember. So that's a situation where we employ more and more people than the required number of employees to carry out a certain task. And then this disguised unemployment, if not hidden unemployment, arises. And what's seasonal unemployment? දැන් හිකඩු තියෙන්නේ seasonal unemployment. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ season එකට විතරයි tourism ඒ season එකට විතරයි ඒගොල්ලෝ වැඩ කරන්නේ. අනිත් එකේ shape එකේ නිකන් තමයි ඉන්නේ. හැබැයි season එකට ඒ ටික හොඳට වැඩ කරලා they earn the income. See, that is the seasonal unemployment. It arises due to seasonal factors. And what's this cyclical unemployment? This is the unemployment that occurs as a result of the economy moving through the business cycle. During the recessionary periods, unemployment increases, and then during expansion period, that cyclical unemployment reduces. Right. So somehow the answer for this question 46 is the third one. 47th one, sustainable development covers three main spheres, namely. Okay, so what are the three main spheres covered by the sustainable development? When it comes to sustainable development, we focus on environment, economy, and then society. So that the answer is the first one. Again, these are facts. You just need to refer the note, and that's it. Okay, now we will move to this question 48. It says, the table below summarizes the labor market situation in a hypothetical economy. So we get the working age population, employed population, and then unemployed population. So simply by adding these two, we can find the labor force in each year. So labor force is equal to, let's say, 30 in year 2018, and that is 40 in year 2020. Right. Now let's get into the question. Based on this information, which of the following is an accurate statement? The rate of unemployment has increased from 2018 to 2020. Okay, so let me check that. We have 2018, also we have 2020. So how do we calculate this unemployment rate? That is the unemployed population over the labor force multiplied by 100. So in the second year, unemployment is 8, labor force is 40, and we multiply this by 100. See that now? When you simplify this thing, you get 20. And here 5, again it's 20%. See, nothing has happened to the unemployment rate. So there's no increase, there's no decrease. මේ දෙකම අපිට අයින් කරලා දාන්න පුළුවන්. Third one says labor force participation rate has increased from 60% in 2018 to 67% in 2020. So let's see that we calculate labor force participation rate. So that is the labor force over working age population, right? Working age population. So what's the value? Labor force is 30, working age population is 50, and we multiply this by 100 so that we get 60%. And in year 2020, labor force is 40, and then working age population is 60 multiplied by 100, so which is 4 over 6 into 100. 4 over 6 into 100 will give us 66.67%. Yes, approximately the provided values are true. In year 2018, labor force participation rate is 60%, and in year 2020, it is approximately 67%. So this has to be the answer. Right. Look at the fourth one. Labor force participation rate has decreased. නෑ. දැන් මම මේක කියුවේ ඇත්තටම අතන අර 66.67 එන නිසා. ඒක decrease වෙලා නේ ඒක ඇත්තටම increase වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතින් මේක කියලා වැඩක් නෑ එහෙනම්. Although population has grown, has the population grown? We don't know. මොකද we don't have data, enough data to comment on that thing. In this is not relevant. Right. 49. According to the country's economic classification, in which year was Sri Lanka assigned upper middle income country status by World Bank? එතකොට මේක අර current information this is something specific. So this happened in 2019. එතකොට ඔයාලක මතක තියාගන්න this happened in 2019. So answer for this question 49 is the fourth one. Right. And look at this last one, 50th. 3 most heavily loss-making state-owned enterprises in Sri Lanka at present. Okay, so we'll skip this one because this answer will not be relevant for your A-level year.